Welcome to this lecture. So in the previous lecture we just implemented this method, change MAC method. So this was basically by entered from the user. So user will input the MAC addresses to change, and based on that we'll just change the MAC addresses, and we also saw the current MAC addresses. But now what we want is, instead of just input from the user, we want to include both of these. So there can be also random MAC change, so user do not need to do anything. They will simply choose the option either to change manually or randomly. So let's see how this can be done. So first of all, let me just define a process which will just generate the random MAC address. So this will just generate the random MAC address, this method. So I have an idea that we can just generate the random MAC addresses by just combining two type over here. So generally the MAC addresses is assigned by the Cisco and a Dell. So first of all, we'll just make a list of a number that our MAC addresses are basically started with, or basically the devices MAC addresses start with. So it normally starts with these three characters. So let me show you here. And the next one would be 96, and these are legit, so you cannot change this number. This is the Cisco legitimate or genuine numbers which starts our MAC addresses. So next one would be Dell. So I'll also make these Dell starting addresses, and first one is obviously 00. Again the next one will be 14, and the next one would be, let me say, 22. So this will be the starting MAC address. So next thing what we want is, we'll just take anything from this Cisco or Dell, and this will be three characters. So first three pairs, so no, not only the characters. So if you see here, this first three will be the pairs of either Cisco or a Dell, and after this we'll just make these three numbers, or basically these three pairs, three last pairs, on a random selection. So let's go down here, and let's say that MAC address will be the choice. So this is inbuilt method which is going to give us the choice between either Cisco or either Dell. So we have made a choice over here, which will just see that the first pair, or basically the first pair, will be from Cisco and a Dell defined hardware, this Cisco or a Dell, and the last three pair will be generated randomly. So let's generate that random last three pairs. So I'll just say for I in range, and it is 3, because we want basically the loop to execute 3 times, because we just want the 3 pairs, last 3 pairs. So let's go over here again. So in this range, what we're gonna do is, we are going to make one pair at a time. So I'll just say choice, and again here I want to convert with the string. So basically we want rand int. So if you have heard about this rand int, we haven't imported that module first. So I have to import, and I'm just not interested in importing only random module. I just don't do something like random, because if you do that random, you have to call from random again. So instead of doing that, I'll just say from random import me choice, and I also want to import the next thing, and that is your rand int. So now we have imported both of this method from this random module, and you can check the documentation of working of this. So randint basically gives you one integer at a time based on this number that you inserted in between here. So it should be the range inside this parenthesis. So I want the number from 0 to 9, so it can be any one number from 0 to 9. It will be random, obviously choice will, or basically this rand int will generate us a random number. So next pair I want is going to be again from this choice. Let's see, we have to again do the same thing, that is again one, okay, one, what I'm doing, so it is should be rand int, and here I want again 0 to 9 again, and the next statement will be very important statement, because I want to add both of these over here. So I'll just say 1 plus 2, and here I have to first of all make this string. So let me just add this first, and let's convert this to a string. So let me just typecast over here. Now we have added this 1 and 2, which will be just getting us a 3 pair. So you can see what we just did. For each pair, this loop will run and it will generate this first number from this 1 and the second number from this 2, and we just added over here to make one complete pair. And this loop will run 3 times. That means we'll just get three pairs of the number, which will be random basically, because this is randint. So the next thing is very important, and now the next thing will be to append to this MAC addresses that we just created over here. So you could see this will be MAC address, and I want this MAC address, basically I have to append because this is the list, and I want to append, let me say this 3. So this should be 3, that should be appended to MAC addresses. But if you remember, till now we are also making these all of the numbers but without this colon in between them. So we made successfully this number which will be random, but they don't have this MAC address, or basically this colon in between this number. So now we have to make this colon in between them. So in order to make that, you have to remember about the join method. It was very important method. I have just told you that before, and that is going to be here returned. And let me just concatenate it with join method, and let me add MAC address. So what we just did here, basically, let me just open my ideally and let me show you what is happening over here. So if I just say something like, let me just join, and let me just call this join method. Okay, join method in maybe the iterables. So let me say A, B, C, D is my iterable. If I hit enter, you could see that this colon was inserted in between them. So it was not inserted at the beginning, it was not inserted in the middle. This is what we just need, because we want this join, or basically this colon, to be inserted in between this number. So we just inserted in between this number inside this MAC addresses, and we just return that MAC addresses from this random MAC. So we just now call this MAC addresses. So instead of just making here that is to call manually, let's make one conditional flow right here. So what I'm gonna do here is I'll just check if maybe print some messages first. Print messages like enter 1 for manual changing of MAC address, and 2 for random MAC address. So this will be message that will be just printed over here, but we now need the input because we want to have this 1 or 2 inputted by the user. So that can be done, let me say input, and I'll just say imp, and I'll just input now, that is the number. So we'll have the number, but just remember this will be string because input will just get the string. So after we just get the imp, I'll just check if imp is equal 1. So you could see I'm not writing this 1 because this will be the integer, and the input that is given by this input method will be in the form of a string. That means I'll just put 1. Now we'll make the flow control in order to just see if the user want the random MAC address or the MAC address that is inputted by the user. So if the input is 1, what we're gonna do is we'll simply see the manual changing for this. So that means we have to now call this MAC change or change MAC with this interface and the new MAC. So I'll just say change MAC for me with this interface, and basically we have to pass the new MAC. So next thing is okay, if they input 1, then only we'll just get the input. So that makes sense. So let me just grab this and let me just go over here, and now we'll just change the MAC, and it is showing error. Just go over here. So the next thing what we want is to check the input for 2, or basically I'll just say elif imp is again the next digit, that will be 2 in this case. And if it is that case, then we have to first call that mac random, and I'll say random will be the mac, and I'll just call this mac random. And after I just call this mac random, so we just made this file over here saying that if input is 1, then we'll just change the mac. If input is 2, then that means there should be the random. So before that, let me just print that random mac 2, because I want to see what the random is, basically what the mac was set, and we'll see the mac that is set from this random basically the random mac method. So now next thing what you need to do is, you can see we have an error over here, that is because we have to set this inside the method. So I'll just make this inside the method because we have called the method over here, if you see. So I'll just put this inside the main method, that is our main method. Let me just paste it down here. You could see we have resolved the error now. So it's time to now call this main method. So you could see I have kept this interface outside of this main, because we have to also get this interface inputted from the user, so as to just get the interface. And because in both of the case, you can see in the change mac basically with the random, and basically the mac address that is inputted from the user manually, they both need the interface. So I've just decided to just input the interface before, and that will be with this option that is input by the user. So next thing what you need to do is, you have to now call this main method which has this program. So main program our is in this main method. So let's call this main method over here. So now what I'm going to do is, we are going to use this convention over here, if name equal main. And if you see what this does is, inside here I'm going to call this main method. So in this is very important statement right here. What this does is, basically it will set this special variable which is name first, and second thing, it is going to execute every code that is over here, and it has the main method. That means it is going to call this main method, and this main method will call some of these method, which is change mac again with this random mac method. So this is our complete program. So let's see how this works. So okay, we are getting some error. Let's see what is the error about. So let me just remove this one. Let's run this real quick and see what is the error about. So it is saying change mac is having the problem. So okay, why it is having a problem? Okay, what we just did, there is two defined main. So let's remove this main. Okay, so now we have rectified this problem. Let's see how this goes. So let me just run our mac changer. It is saying what you need. So I'll just say enter 1 for the manual changing of the mac address, or 2 for the random mac address. So I want the random mac address option, so I'll just say 2. So I just need the random mac address, so let me just press 2 over here. Let me hit enter. Then it will say enter your network interface. My network interface is WLAN 0. I want to change this one, and you could see now we have changed to this new mac address. You can check it by going over here, and let's create the new window or new terminal. Open the new terminal. I have config to see over here, and this is our new mac address. You could clearly see over here, and this is done by using this program. So we completed our mac changer program. In this lecture we saw how to make our random mac address, and the mac address that can be also used from the input which is given by the user. So we saw how to make use of this swap process. So this was the important module to work with, because this will just execute your code in the cell with this call method. And the difference between this call method and you could see in this check output, this is going to run in a line basically. So this is the important, because this will care about the sequence and this does not care about the sequence. This both will just run the arguments based on what is just passed inside this parenthesis, and it will execute in this cell which we have just given as true. So we made use of this sub process, which was important module to learn about here. We just made this random module to just make the random MAC address over here. So this will be wrap for this lecture. We just made a complete MAC changer in this lecture. So this was interesting section. So see you in the next one.